Hello, this is Katie. We're going to be making a pendant today using some bare copper wire and gemstones. We're going to be using a 1.25mm bare copper wire and a 0.4mm bare copper wire. The design that I'm going to make in the demo is very slightly different to this, but it also incorporates doing this. It's just a very slight change just at the bottom there, but I'll show you how you can work both ways. We're going to be using, in my design, I'm going to use some bumblebee jasper, but you can also use any sort of drop gemstone, so that's a tiger's eye in there. So any gemstone that's top drilled drop. So this is drilled on the point there, this amazing shield shape. So I'll pop a link down below of how to find somewhere that will get you that shape of gemstone as well. Also, I'll be using bail making pliers, chain nose or flat nose pliers that go to a small tip, and some flush cutters. Also, we're going to be using a mandrel, so the mandrel to form that shape. Now the mandrel that I've used is 3.5 centimeters diameter. So I'm using, I'll pop this in here, I'm using the very end of my bracelet mandrel, the stainless steel bracelet mandrel. So the dimensions, all the measurements are built on a 3.5 centimeters, so the whole sort of a crossways there, but you can easily just adapt it for different sizes too. Okay, so I'm just going to move all these out of the way and we'll get on with this first part of our design. Okay, to begin with, we're going to need to form these shapes with our wire. So these two pieces here are exactly 6 inches long each. And this is my 1.25mm wire, 6 inches, and 2 lengths of those. We're going to form these shapes. This is the gemstone we're going to use, so I'm just going to push that out of the way just for a moment so it's not in the way. And we're also going to be using the bracelet mandrel that I showed you just a few seconds ago to make these forms. So I'm just going to move these out of the way and one of those and show you what we're going to do. So I'm going to bring the bracelet mandrel in, just pop it underneath there. So I'm just using the very end of it, so that's the most narrow point. I'm going to bring my wire up and around. So I'm going to bring it up and around and just form it around the end of there and just let them cross over a little bit, and it will spring back. And just make sure when it does spring back that it's actually springing back nice and evenly. Now that's not evenly, so I need to pop that back in. Pull this one out a little bit more and cross over, and that's better, that's a little bit more even there. So I can move that out of the way for a few seconds. And now I need to go in with my smallest mandrel of the baling pliers. And working on, you can open that up slightly, working on one of the sides. So we're going to work on this outer side first. I'm just going to pop it in as close as possible. I'm turning it away, so I'm turning it towards the outside. So turning and then reposition your pliers and then keep turning until that wire's touching the actual frame there. So you've got that full circle touching the frame. And the same at this side. So over using that smallest mandrel, which is around about 2mm, and that's going to bring those together. Now what we want to do is these to actually come together and form together nicely. So just making sure they're nice and flat against each other. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a very small amount of wire and just pop a few wraps on this one side. So one, doesn't matter how many, just depends on your length of wire. So a few wraps just on one side, and I want these to come together like so. So because wire's got a memory, we're just going to cross them over a little bit more, very gently, so that we're coming more together like so. Now I'm going to pop this right up to the top. I'm going to wrap around twice to bind those together, and then wrap a few wraps on this outer edge here as well. So I've just got a little bit of a wrap on each side, and it's holding together my frame for me. So all these little things are going to help you get the perfect form and the perfect distance of everything when it comes to actually finishing off the piece. So I'm going to be popping a lot of temporary wraps in as we go along, but all of them are designed to help you get a really good finish. So I've got those wraps just in there. I'm just going to snip those off and I'll show you a little bit closer. So popped on there, and then another wrap at this side, another snip, sorry, and then just finish them off nicely so that we haven't got any ends protruding. If I just bring that up there, you can see there's just a couple of wraps, well, about 3 or 4 wraps on each side, and it's brought that together and it's holding those loops together, which now look like it's just one loop where it is actually 2, like so. So that's that one done, which is exactly the same as this one here. Okay, and then we're going to move on to make the opposite side. Now we're going to move back to using our baling pliers, and we're going to be using the second one, so this second size, which I believe is about 3mm, and we're going to be using the 6mm one there. Okay, so we're going to pop our pliers in and pop one of those loops just like we did on the other one. So just right to the very end, and pulling this all the way around nice and tight until it creates a loop all the way back to the wire. And then we're going to mimic that on the other side. So we want to turn this around, and we want our loop to be coming towards us in this direction. So we want them to be flat, so the same way. So I'm going to hold this, pop my pliers in, make sure that I'm in the right position on my wire, and start turning. You can turn the wire this way, and then I can reposition, pop my pliers in and tighten that up. So both my circles are the same way. Okay, now I'm going to use this mandrel. So this is the 6mm mandrel of my pliers. I'm going to pop them in this way. So my loop is coming towards the smaller one, and we're going to wrap around this one here. So we're actually going to pop this in and then push it backwards around that 6. So push it backwards and all the way around, and making sure that it comes all the way around, and then you can take that out and you'll have this kind of hook shape. And we're going to do the same at this side. So putting the opposite side of the pliers right up next to that loop, and then again we're going to push this back this direction, and you'll have that little kind of hook shape on that side too, and they'll be perfectly identical to each other, like so. Now we're going to bring in that mandrel again, so we'll be reshaping this a little bit, but this is just going to initially help us. So with the hooks pointing downwards, we're going to pop on to that mandrel and just start shaping this around. So shaping, sorry if this looks a bit awkward, but the mandrel's really heavy. Okay, so just getting that initial shape in, just to show you the mandrel's like huge and really, really heavy stainless steel. It's quite hard to hold when you're holding it under a camera. Okay, so now we've got this shape in, we need to form it into this shape. Now this is mainly done by hand, unless you've got something, a smaller mandrel, you can maybe shape it round, but I just tended to do it. So I'm supporting it on the inside there, and I'm just bringing this in, just making sure I'm just going a little bit, mimicking each movement on each side until it comes together and is the right shape. So just taking your time, take a little bit more time than I'm doing here, and once you've mimicked it a little bit more, sort of crossing these over, so we want those to come together. Now what we want is it to sit inside here, like so. Okay, so that is absolutely perfect that the way it is there. And then what you're going to do is actually make a wrap around here. So I'm going to use this one. So as you can see, this is a difference that I've made in this final design, is that this is coming very, very close to the bottom here. Now if you want your design to continue this weave at the very bottom here, all I would suggest is doing the exact same as what we've been doing, but just before you start manipulating this wire, cut about 1 centimetre, ½ an inch off, just to make it a little bit shorter, and that will just give you that little bit of extra space there. but I just thought, I just had a moment while I was doing the prep for this and thought, no, I'm going to do it this way, and I quite like how it's come out. So this is what we've got here. So what we need to do next is take a little piece of scrap wire of the 0.4 and bind these two together. So bringing this up through this loop and just holding it down with the rest of the wire there, I can come in between and pop my wire through just to start making these wraps. So I'm utilising this little gap that's there. Okay, now we don't want to wrap it too tight that it tends to flip over each other. We want it to just sit nice and close and just together, not flipped over. So just moving these out of the way. And about 3 or 4 wraps, both finishing at the same side. So once you've got those wraps in, so I've got 4 wraps on the front there. I'm just going to flip this over to the back side of it. So just giving that a bit of a squish with my fingers, making sure they're nice and close together. Turn this over and then I can cut off, so I'm making all my cuts on one side. So cutting off here and here. And giving that a squish. So now we've got that in place, this one's bound together, this one's bound together, and they will sit inside each other very nicely. We'll move on to how to set it up so that the spacing stays absolutely perfect. So in this next stage where we stabilise everything and make life easier for you to wrap and keep everything in place, we're going to bind these pieces here. So we're just going to use some scrap wire and bind these pieces. Now if you don't bind these pieces, what you might find is you might start wrapping and you'll find that you've wrapped up here and things are a bit squiff and you think, oh, I'll just straighten it out. It doesn't work, it won't move for you, not in this pear shape. So just by binding these, and then we'll start our wrapping at the bottom and work our way up, we know it's all going to sit really, really beautifully and perfectly. So all we do to bind them, I won't go through the whole of this because I've got one already done, is we're going to pop some wire in this gap here and then wrap around, so just anchoring one part in first, so the parts where the actual frame touches. So wrapping this one in first, just a few wraps on each, doesn't have to be neat, these are not staying. So once you've got that one in there, then move on and pop one in there, and then use this tail from this one. So let's pretend we've already got that wrap in this side. You'd use this tail from this one just to bob down to this here and wrap over a couple of times. Like I say, this doesn't have to be neat. This, in fact, try not to do it too neat because you're going to have to take that off as well. So once you've got that side in, then anchor that side in and you'll find everything will sit really, really beautifully. And you can start your wrapping with the confidence that nothing's going to slip and everything's going to stay really centralised. Okay, so now we're going to move on to this part. Now at this point, you're going to want to take some 0.4mm wire. Now I'm just going to take a slightly shorter piece because I'm not going to be actually wrapping the whole of this, but the length you need to take of your 0.4mm wire is 2 meters. Now that's quite a lot of wire to handle, but we're only going to be handling actually 1 meter at a time. So I'm just going to take a slightly smaller amount first. So, and what you're going to do is, of your 2 meters, this is a small piece, you're going to find that central point and pop the central point on here, and then you're going to start wrapping 2 wires together. Now when you're wrapping 2 wires together, obviously normally we would start a wrap on a single wire, so we don't want to be pulling too tight like we would do on a normal single wire because we don't want to encourage these to slip and end up sitting on top of each other. So it's just a matter of wrapping around and keeping the wire against so that it's nice and neat but not too tight, and try not to use the wire too much, as in run your fingers down it, kind of push it through and then flick it through and then around and then around. The more you touch your wire, the more you handle your wire with your hands, the more workhand it will become and the harder it is to use. It becomes less malleable. So the least you touch your wire, the better. So you're going to work from halfway point up to about here, and then work this one from halfway point up to about here, and then you're going to have 2 wires left to wrap with. So I'm just going to move on to this piece that's already prepared. So you will end up at this point here. So you've still got these temporary wraps up here, and still we've wrapped that whole section. It's really nice and neat. And then just to finish it off, I just didn't squish it, just tapped it, just to make it look very nice and neat and bring it all together really, really beautifully. So then we're going to move on to doing a basket weave. So the basket weave is going to come up these sides. So my wire from this side is coming from the underneath. I'm just going to move this wire out of the way for a second. So it's coming from the underneath. So I'm going to come around and I'm going to poke it down and then pull through like so. And what's going to happen is we're going to put 3 wraps on this outer wire. Now the reason we're putting 3 on the outer wire is because this is a longer distance than over here. So 3 wraps here, and then we're going to skip under and up through this larger gap, and 2 wraps on the inside wire. So making sure you've pushed everything together. Then I can push this down, pulling that through. Like I say, try to not run your hands down the wire as such. Just very, very lightly. So 2 wraps there. Then I'm going to push this down and back out to this outer wire. So then we're going to come over and through. And you're going to work your way until you get to the very top of here. So because you're doing 3 on the outer, you've got a further distance to travel here, so your wrapping will become slightly more distance as you come up like so. So your wrapping will come up, 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 and slightly more gappy, so it will give you that sort of nice look to your piece as you come up the sides. Okay, so I'm just going to wrap this section and then I'll come back to you in a second and just show you what to do along these sides. Okay, so I've finished my weaving all the way up to here, so there's a small gap just left there just for a little bit of space so that you can get your wires wrapped around this outside. So we're going to start wrapping on that single on that single wire until we get up to the place where this is attached. So I've taken off my little bit of scrap wire off this side. I've left this side on for now because I've still got this side to wrap. And then all I'm going to do is when it comes to joining up with that loop, I'm just going to bring this through and just make sure it's nice and smooth and not trying to help make the wires crossed over. So we're just going to wrap over both of those, just catching in that loop, and we're going to put 3 wraps into that gap. So just making sure you take your time and making sure they don't overlap each other, or the main wires, the frame wires overlap each other. So I've got 3 wraps in that little gap there, just there, and then I can continue wrapping on a single wire through this gap, just making sure each one is nice and neat and pushed up, and continue wrapping there. And then when you get to this section, you'll have 3 wraps just like we just did here, and then wrap all the way up to them very beginning wraps that we did right at the beginning when we joined these together. And then you're going to continue and do the exact same all the way up this side. So at that point you're almost there. You'll have this in front of you, so everything wrapped nice and neat. So now we need to add our gemstone. So we want to choose which side is going to be your front. So I can see I cut on this side, so I'm going to use this side, so that side's going to be the front there. So I'm going to go into this loop here. So I want my wire coming over the top, so I'm wrapping over the top of my wire. So I'm going to pop my wire in there and just pop it around the back and hold it, and then I'm going to wrap about 3 or 4 times around that in wire. So don't worry about its positioning so much just at the moment. It's just nice tight wraps on that inner wire, so you've got a really good base, a really strong base for your gemstone to be adhered to. So nice wraps. There's like 4 wraps on that inside there now. Then just pop that wire around the back, nice and tight together. So then I'm going to choose which side I want to be the front of my pendant. I like that side the best. And then I'm going to find the drill hole and come through like so. Might be better just to smooth off your wire first a little bit, like so. So coming through there and letting this drop down, and then just sliding that down a little bit and finding the right position so this is going to sit nicely here. So whether you're using a drop, finding that nice position for it to sit so it's sat nicely in that section there, and then I'm going to wrap in here, and then I want to wrap coming upwards because my wires are at the top here, so I'm going to use this little gap here right at the very top to pull that through and then slide that down at this side like so. Make sure I mimic the same mirror image, the same amount of wraps on the opposite side. So just using that little gap again at the top there to pull through and making sure you're getting them wraps nice and tight together. If you find it hard to do with your fingernails, just squish the wraps together a little bit with your pliers and through. So we want these to be a nice tight wrapped so that we know it's going to sit there nice and safely and not try and slide anywhere. That it shouldn't do because of the distance sort of widening, but it shouldn't move at all. So now we're going to go over to the back, just give them a little squish, making sure the wraps are nice and tight together, and snip off our loose wires like so, making sure there's nothing there to scratch with or anything like that. There we go. Very good. So now our gemstone is in place, like so. So all we need to do now is make that little bail, that little section for a chain to pass through. So I'm just going to do that using my bailing pliers and another piece of my 1.25 wire. So I'm going to use the 6mm, so it's got a nice big loop on it. So I'm just going to make a few little spirals. So I'm just wrapping it around and making a few spirals, making sure they're nice and tight on my mandrel. You usually find the first one is probably, because we're using quite a thick gauge of wire, it's probably a little bit out of shape. So let's get rid of that first one. So I've cut this flush side so I know this side of this ring is flat. So now if I turn my pliers over and very, very closely snip the next wire up and let that ring drop down, I know both sides of this ring are flush cut. So by flush cut I mean both ends are flat. So I should be able to take 2 pairs of pliers, hold these together and get them so they're almost, it will never be as good as saw cuts because saw cut jump rings are the best, but that is as close as you can get with flush cutters. And then just to finish off, I just need to open up that jump ring that we've just created like so, place that through our double loop at the top, pop our pliers back in, and just by moving one of the pliers, giving it a nice wiggle, make sure you can feel those wires are together. And that's our pendant finished, fully created and ready to wear. So let's just take a look at the previous design that I'd made. So this one was made, and it was made continuing that that basket weave all the way around the bottom. So it was made exactly the same, apart from cutting about 1 centimetre or ½ an inch off that middle piece and then shaping it, and that'll give you that slightly smaller dimension. And instead of doing this single wraps, all these single wraps all the way around both wires, we've continued the basket weave there, but still started in the middle so that we're working nice and evenly around each piece. But it's quite a nice fun design, and I'm really pleased with it. And like I say, we can also use drop gemstones And I'm also in the process, I haven't made the other one just yet, of making a smaller one, but it's just a slight variation on the design, but more to make maybe an earring design there. Okay, so I'm going to be adding lots and lots more videos to my YouTube channel, especially over the coming weeks where I've got lots and lots of time spare. So look out for more videos coming. Please click that subscribe button. That will give me a great boost and give me some more inspiration that you're actually seeing what I'm doing and wanting to see more. So yeah, I'll pop a couple more video links on here as well. Take a look at my channel, make sure you click that subscribe, and I will see you again very soon.